Next up for this lesson, we will primarily focus on a new Explore page. But real quick, let's wrap up some loose ends. So in PHP Storm, if I visit the profiles controller, here's our update action, and there's one glaring issue. So yes, we perform the validation, and then we pass it to the update action. But if you think about it, everything looks good here except this section. And you have to be really, really careful about this. Your password is not hashed. So let me show you a way to get around this. I do this for almost all of my projects, and you'll see I have a little note here. You can add a custom mutator. Basically, the way this works is if I were to set the password like this, it will first be piped through this method. So now we can store it manually, but rather than setting it equal to what the user passes here, I will first hash it using the bcrypt method. So please don't forget that. Okay, next, if I go to my edit profile page, right now, if I submit this, notice that the avatar is required. And we don't really want this. Maybe if you want to change your username, why do you have to select your avatar again? So instead, back to Profiles controller, we can make avatar optional. And right here for avatar, it's no longer required, it's optional. Which means if we scroll down, we only store the avatar if one is present. If we have an avatar, only on that condition do we store it. Okay, so now, when you edit your profile, here's the section for the avatar. The input is no longer required. All right, so switch back, edit the profile, and now I can update the password alone without affecting the avatar. And then most importantly, if we switch back and give this a refresh, it's now hashed. All right, some other loose ends. Let's open this up. One little tip here in Followable. I left a note for this in the source code a few episodes ago. You'll remember that we implemented a toggle follow method on the user model. This allows you to say user, toggle a follow for the other user. And we implement it like this. If we're following that user, then unfollow them. Otherwise, follow them. But as it turns out, you can instead use a toggle method like this. Grab the relationship, and we're going to toggle a follow for the given user. So this does the exact same thing, but it cleans up our code a little bit. All right, and then finally, one last thing. If I go to my route/web file, here's a little note. So notice if we want to edit an existing profile, we've added the necessary middleware, but we did not do it here. So again, you can either apply this on the controller itself or to each route. Let's make sure we add that. Or wrap it within a group. All right, so now we're ready to get going. I'd like to implement an Explore page. Now I've added the endpoint there, but no route. Let's do it now. So if you make a GET request to Explore, why don't we set up an Explore controller? Like so. Okay, so now, of course, it's going to squawk that we don't have that controller. PHP Artisan make a controller. All right, run it again. Now the index action does not exist. And this will return a view. We'll just call it Explore within the views root folder. So now in our resources views directory, and why don't we could do the master or the app component. So now if I come back and refresh, there we go. However, something to consider. Should this be limited to authenticated users? So for example, if I open this in a private window, even guests can access that page. But we are depending on the current user. So you just have to decide, is this something only authenticated users can browse, or can any guest? For now, I'm going to limit it to authenticated users. So I will bring that up into our auth group middleware. Okay, so now if we try to access that page as a guest, it'll redirect you to the login page. All right, so we're going to keep it pretty simple and just have a grid of all the users in our system. So with that in mind, let's boot up Tinker and then create a bunch of users using the factory helper. Let's do, how about 10 different users? And we get an error because we forgot to update the database factory. So let's go to User Factory, and right down here, we're going to set up a username, and I do want this to be unique. Okay, let's see if we can do it again. And now it works. 10 random users. So now, in our Explore controller, let's pass through the users. And we'll say user paginate into sets of 50, and then optimize the imports. All right, let's go back to our Explore page, and we'll have a grid here. And yeah, maybe we'll say for each users as user. Maybe we start with the user's avatar. And we'll set a width of, how about 60 pixels? All right, let's have a look. I'll come back and give this a refresh. So we see my avatar, because I've added one, but for all these other ones, they don't have any avatar. So it sounds like we need to set up a default avatar in these situations. Let's have a look. In my user model, here's where we get the avatar. So why don't we say, we're going to generate an asset, and if we have an avatar, use that. Otherwise, let's use our default avatar, and let's see if I have one. I don't, but in the storage directory, let's see. Yeah, so that can be our default avatar. I'm going to paste that in here and call it default avatar. And now we will link to that. Okay, so if I come back and we give this a refresh, there we go. Okay, so next we can style this however you want. You could play around with CSS grids, so something like grid calls 9, and then a little bit of a gap, something like that if you want. Or why don't we just keep it as a long list, and then to the right will be the user's information. So here, let's maybe, let's wrap this within a div. And then here we will set a display of flex, margin right of 4, and then another section for the user's name. Next, maybe we'll make it bold. And then I want the @ symbol at the beginning, but that'll escape it. So sometimes I'll just do it like this instead. Finally, let's put the items to the center. And then maybe give it a little margin bottom. And we'll see how that looks. All right, so if I switch back, this is what we get, just a big long list. And then of course at the bottom, we don't have this many users, but if we did, we should render pagination. So we could do it right here. Anyways, that won't show up right now. Okay, so the only remaining step is let's make the image rounded and then the whole thing clickable. Now what we could do, maybe let's see if we can make the anchor tag the wrapper, and this will go to the user's path. All right, let's see what that looks like. Yeah, so now notice the whole thing is selectable. And there we go. So now maybe we want to follow Patrick46. We'll click follow. Ooh, but we have one issue here. It looks like we forgot to update the follow. So let's have a look. We're going to go to our follow button component that we created. And sure enough, we have the name instead of the username. Or to keep this from happening again, I can swap it out with a named route. Maybe we'll call it follow. Okay, so now to the routes file. Here's that endpoint. So let's give it a name of follow and reformat. So we'll come back, click follow me, and it works. We're now following Gene, who of course has no tweets. Let's do Walter as well. And in fact, why don't we give a bunch of these people some tweets? So we'll do this in Tinker. So let's grab our users. This has everyone. Actually, let's skip myself. Okay, so now we have everyone excluding me. And what we can say is for each user, let's whip up a database factory. Maybe they'll have 10 tweets each. However, I will hardcode the user ID. All right, did that do it? Yeah, that did it. So now for every single user, if we give this a refresh, we have a bunch of tweets. Okay, let's come back to Firefox. We'll give it a refresh. Here's Brooks' tweets. Here are Gene's. And of course, if we go to our timeline, we'll see everyone's tweets, including my own. But you know what? Gene is tweeting too frequently, so we're going to unfollow Gene, switch back, and now she no longer shows up. Great job.